So on today's video I want to talk to you about probably one of the most frustrating moments in my history and the band that was involved, and that band is Shutdown. So, Shutdown from the Worcestershire and Gloucestershire area. The first time I got to know them and meet them was actually when they supported Green Day in Stoke on Green Day's first UK tour, which was a gig that Richard from Exit Condition organised that I went across to. It was on the 23rd of December 1991, I believe. Green Day, Exit Condition, Goober Patrol and Shutdown. What a cracking lineup, eh? So Shutdown were obviously the first band on, and I wasn't really aware of them before that. I think that I remember that there were two bands called Shutdown in the UK, because at that time I think there'd been another band in Nottingham called Shutdown who changed their name to Downfall to avoid confusion. And so I wasn't really sure what to expect, because like I say, I hadn't actually heard them, and when they played I was just like, wow, these lot are good. I remember that it was sort of quite frenetic, but it was also really tight, and there was obviously like an influence of bands like Sam I Am as well, sort of creeping in there as well, and it was just, they just seemed like a kick-ass live band, and I was intrigued. So I remember after they played, Neil and Chris were doing the merch, were behind the merch table, and I was doing the merch table for Goober Patrol, of course. And I started talking to them, saying that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. You know, what you're doing, what you're recording. And it came to light that they were doing a 12-inch on a Swiss label called Off the Disc Records, who I think put out like an Infest record from memory. And they'd recorded that back in, I think, sort of 6 months previous, in like May, June 1991. So they say, yeah, we're waiting for this 12-inch to come out. It seems to be dragging. You know, we've got a whole new set now, so it's kind of old songs. I'll send you a tape up of it. And so I think sort of soon after Christmas, New Year, I did get a tape through from Neil, which also had their first demo on it and the 12-inch that they recorded. Now, as many bands at the time, they had gone to Martin Nichols at the White House studio in Weston-super-Mare, so obviously the production was just brilliant on it. And I just remember this 12-inch, I was like, wow, this is really good. And there were some songs on there that really stood out to me. It sounded a little bit different to what they've been playing when I saw them live, because like I say, it was older songs already. But yeah, I was just really keen, and I knew at the time, I think Off the Disc were also doing a 7-inch by a Canadian band called Red Fisher. And at this point I'd started being in touch with John from Rise, who'd been sending me through all these Canadian bands that he recommended, and I remember Red Fisher was one of those bands. So I think I spoke to Neil and then said, would you have any, worries about me sort of like contacting Thomas from Off the Disc, because like I'd really like to carry this record when it does come out. And I think also I asked if they wanted to go on the Floor 81 compilation, but bearing in mind I was compiling it, I think in a couple of weeks time, it was too late. But they did say, oh, we're going to go in the studio soon and record some new songs. So I said, well, when you record new songs, send them through, because I'd be keen on perhaps doing something. So I contacted Thomas from Off the Disc, and we agreed for me to get 100 copies of it, because I think he had no distribution really in the UK. I think the band were going to get some copies and that was it. So I thought, well, I've got Floor 81 coming out soon, so perhaps we could tie it in together and try and, when I'm sending wholesale copies out of Floor 81, send some wholesale copies out of Shutdown to sort of various distros around. So I think we just did it mail order. We didn't give it to like SRD or anything. but I'd agreed to sort of take them Sail or Return, I think, from Thomas, and it was just thing. And I remember, so I think in the sort of like the May, around that sort of time when it came out, they actually went back into the White House then and recorded 5 songs. And I remember when the demo tape came, it was just like, whoa, this is brilliant. Now this is the band I saw live. It was like, and the new songs were fantastic. And I remember being really excited, and I said to Neil, I'd love to do like a Shutdown record on Boss Tuneage. Are you interested? And I think at the time they said yes. When the 12-inch came in, what we did is we actually called it Bosstage 007, because I said, well, if I can sort of make some kind of reference to Boss Tuneage on it, this is going to actually help sell the 12-inch, and Thomas agreed on that, and Neil as well. So I went to get some more stickers from the Vicar, watched the Guru Troll split single to learn about the stickers from the Vicar on that video, and there was about 100 copies that were done with a Bosstage 007 catalogue number on them. So sort of later into 1992 I started doing the co-releases with RPN, and I think that because I'd done this with Thomas at Off the Disc, that led to the RPN hookup and doing more co-releases there. So I think we sort of touched base again in like 1993, and Neil was sort of saying, are you still into doing the album? And at that point I said, yes, definitely, but I can't really guarantee exactly when it's going to come out. Obviously Floor 81 hadn't sold as well, so a lot of the money was tied up in stock with that. The other reason I said yes, I still want to do it, was that I was obviously living in Leicester at university at the time, and I was going to graduate in 1994. And my plan at that point was that I was going to go on the Prince's Youth Business Trust when I graduated, or the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, and try and do the label full time. That was sort of like my ambition and goal. We were also going to move to Cambridge, I think, because I was at uni in Leicester, and obviously my parents were in Lincolnshire, and Julie, my partner, her parents were in Essex. So we want to be sort of equidistant between like our folks, and also try and see what we could set up. And we like Cambridge as a city. Ironically enough, Cambridge became our nearest city a fair few years later, but I digress. So with that in mind, the band went into the studio in August 1993 to record the album. Again, when they recorded, I did say to them, look, I really want to put this out, but at the moment I just can't say exactly when it would come out. I was very wary because they'd sort of waited a year for the Off the Disc 12-inch to come out. I didn't want them being put in another position. But I was so keen to do it, but I just had to work out how I could do it at that time. So late in October 1993, I turned 21, and I had a 21st birthday party gig, and Shutdown played that, as well as Ran played it, because they were the two bands I was planning to do albums by at that point. And it was upstairs at a pub called The Magazine in Leicester, which was just up the road from the Princess Charlotte. And I do remember, my little known fact for this video is that the singer of Corner Shop tried to gay crash, because it was an invitation only for like friends and stuff. And I told him to fuck off. So the whole Shutdown album was brilliant. When I heard it, it was just like, I've got to release this. Come hell or high water, I want this to be on Boss Tuneage, and I've got to find a way to do it. But I was in a complete limbo, because all the stock was still, all the money from the stock was tied up As I mentioned on the Goober Patrol video, I'd lost the record of who owed me money for the early releases, so it was just where am I going to find the money to do this? And the only thing I could see was going on the Prince's Youth Business Trust to be able to sort of kickstart the label at that point. So I was really sort of treading water in the early part of 1994 with the label, to knowing what I wanted to do, but just trying to work out how I was going to do it. I remember Julie, my partner, had graduated the year before, and money was really, really tight. She didn't go straight into a job from uni or anything like that. So we did struggle. We were struggling, and towards the end of my degree, I had to do a 6-week work placement. And because we were in Leicester and money was so tight, I needed to do something close by. And the only thing I could think of doing that was sort of like a record label that was close by was Earache in Nottingham. So I remember I called them up, explained who I was, and they said, yeah, we'll come and have it. I actually spoke to Pete, who was the press officer there, and who's obviously the singer in Lawnmower Death. So he answered the phone, went through to speak to Dig, and then called me back to say, yeah, we can do that. We'd be happy to do that. So I ended up there for a 6-week work placement, and they got me doing production because the production manager had left recently. And sort of 2 to 3 weeks into the placement, they offered me a job. So obviously I was now in a position where, do I try and do the label, or do I take the guarantee of sort of like income by having a salary at a job that's kind of on a, with a record label, which might actually help me first. So I went for the job at Earache, but the only problem with taking the job at Earache is it was made perfectly clear to me that I couldn't do my own record label, and if I had any bands that I sort of wanted to do, that I should give Earache first refusal on them. So this put me in a bit of a tricky position with Shutdown and Ran. Now with Ran, I'd agreed with RPN in Germany that they would pay to press that record. But that still left the problem with Shutdown. And I remember speaking to Neil and explaining the situation. And I said, have you got any problems if I sort of like play Dig, the album and see if he wants to do it? Which he said, well, yeah, no, go ahead. Dig decided he didn't want to do it. And now I had no real avenue, because how could I do a Boss Tuneage release whilst I was working at Earache? So I had to have the conversation with Neil to say, look, I'd really love to do it, but just at the moment my hands are tied. We've always said if another label comes in the interim, then go for it. So that's what we had to do. So obviously Golf Records did come in, and in 1995 they eventually released Amidst a Real Bronx Cheer, which I was really pleased for the band that it finally had come out after all these, what was probably getting on for nearly 2 years of trying. But also it was incredibly gutting when it happened, because that should have been on Boss Tuneage. It still rolls me to this day. And I think the fact that the Shutdown album hadn't come, and I felt like my hands were now tied on doing my record label, it was just getting too difficult. And I wasn't particularly happy in my job at Earache. I felt a bit trapped, and whilst working at Earache, obviously taught me a heck of a lot of things about running a record label and more of the mechanics of how to do it properly. It also taught me a lot of things about how not to run a record label as well. It wasn't a particularly happy time for me. I started to lose interest in music, doing it as a day job, and so I think that things like the Shutdown album coming out on another label and feeling really like my wings had been clipped, and I was really frustrated, and so it petered out. I remember their second album they did for Golf, Icarus, I didn't actually hear at the time, because like I say, I totally just lost interest and involvement in the UK scene in sort of like 97, 98 time. And it was only really as sort of my interest got renewed again towards like 98, 99 that I discovered Icarus, which was a great album, but to be honest, I'm probably in a minority. Amidst a Real Bronx Cheer is still the album for me of the two. So when the label properly kicked off again, I remember I did sort of reconnect with Neil and Chris. I think they did a short-lived band called The Great Leap Forward that they sent me a demo of, and I think we talked briefly about possibly doing that on Boss Tuneage, but I think that fell by the wayside, and then I put forward the idea of doing a Shutdown compilation on Boss Tuneage. The idea being to do pretty much everything they recorded apart from the 2 albums on Gold. So the original 12-inch from Off the Disc, the demos, the 5-track demo from 1992, etc., which was kind of my way of, I think, making myself feel better about it again. The CD comp 1990 to 1995 came out in the early 2000s, and yeah, it was great to finally have a proper Shutdown release on Boss Tuneage after many years of hurt. So fast forward to about 2012, 2013, and I was back in touch with Neil again. His current band that he'd set up with Ian Glasper called 36 Strategies. I think they were supposed to put out 2 7-inch singles on a label that kind of messed them around. So I stepped in to put those 2 singles together as like a mini CD, and that was Strategy 1. And I'll talk more about 36 Strategies on another video, obviously, but we did 3 releases by them in the end. Played some brilliant gigs, I seem to remember, with Jaded Eyes and HDQ. At the time, we all got on like a house on fire. And then Neil obviously joined the Diaz brothers after we lost Dickie. And Chris from Shutdown obviously did the artwork on the Diaz brothers album. And also Coxie and Neil do a fantastic podcast called Screams from the Gutter, which if you've not checked out and you like punk rock, and it's definitely worth a listen. And of course I'll be doing a whole video about Diaz brothers at a later date. So we're still working together today. That's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one.